The moment our fellow geeks, dweebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerfherder Chandler and Jim Kaiju Baker. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
Oh, sorry.
Jeff fell asleep in the theater.
Dr. Sleep.
Waiting for the bonus scene in Dr. Sleep that never happened.
Yeah, there is no bonus scene.
See, that Marvel has really
killed us. They spoiled us.
They have, because now you expect every single movie that you see to have
Yeah, but
a
you know what?
scene.
But here's what I say. It's nice that people are actually sitting through it, and maybe you see a name that you otherwise wouldn't have known, and people are getting credit, because that's what those are there for.
I always think it's interesting to see where they filmed a movie as well.
I think it's all Georgia.
I think it is, yeah.
Every place they film is just Georgia, especially if it's a zombie movie.
Come down to Georgia. We give you peaches.
Yeehaw.
But before we do, you have some news?
I do have some news. I have one news item I really want to kind of dig into because it's divisive. So, dead for almost 70 years, James Dean is set to star in a new movie.
What?
Yes, by director Anton Ernst. The movie is called Finding Jack. And
Is this Anton Ernst in the Ernst Goes to Camp mode?
Ernst goes to jail, I think, is what's going to happen. Ernst is going to get blocked on social media because you got everyone from Chris Evans, Robin Williams' daughter, have come out and basically slammed this as shameful.
So what is it? Yeah. Explain what this is.
So apparently there's this movie. It's called Finding Jack. It's kind of World War II era flick going on. This guy's like, that this character, we want him to be, a certain type. And we couldn't really find an actor that carried the role. And we just decided that James Dean is perfect. So you're taking exactly what we talked about, which was, now we have the ability to take a 50-year-old Will Smith and make him look like he's 19. So now we're just building up dead actors. So it will be body motion captured by an actor, but they will be using footage from existing James Dean movies for his facial features and body movements or whatever. And then someone is going to be dubbing his voice.
Is this a major studio? Is this a big budget movie? I would think that you can't do this without a budget.
I didn't recognize the name of the studio, but the director came out and he said he was saddened and confused by the backlash. We never intended it to be a marketing gimmick. So my question is, if that's the case, then why do it? Just find an actor. You're going to tell me there's not an actor on the planet who can pull off this role. So you got to resurrect a dead actor from 70 years ago
and use scenes from other movies to do it.
Well, I don't know how they're. I guess it's going to be a mishmash, kind of like maybe what they did with Michael Douglas. He's not the main character. I mean, put that out there. He's not the main character, but I guess he's a pretty strong supporting character. But
without a budget, I have a feeling it's going to be like Roger Rabbit in a live action movie.
Yeah, this is scary because this is exactly what we've been talking about in the past, which is you've got this ability now. It's like, we can clone sheep. So at what point do we decide to clone humans?
Well, Ernst might take care of this issue in one fell swoop. After this, probably nobody's going to want to touch it anymore. Reviving
I mean,
a
go
dead
back.
actor.
Go back when they used Fred Astaire in like those Swiffer commercials. Like that was kind of like the dawning of, where you're taking old footage and you're just putting a mop in the guy's hand.
Or sending a hologram of Michael Jackson out on tour.
Yeah, or Tupac. I mean, of all the characters he doesn't even have that big of a oeuvre, right? He was like 24 when he died.
Yeah,
so how many movies
he was
did
maybe
he really
in
do?
2 or 3, big movies, and
right, and they're all black and white. So how? Unless
no. I think one of them might. No, they're in color. Isn't Rebel Without a Cause in color?
I don't know.
Giant.
I'm gonna honestly say that I've never seen any of them.
No, neither have I.
No, there you go. So
I
know. Our nerd creds just went down a notch.
Charlatans! Somebody just shut us off.
Oh, yeah. I find this really fascinating. So I'm going to stay on top of it and see what comes of it. Now, he also has the blessing of the family, which is huge. Who gets credit and who gets the paycheck?
Interesting. Yeah. Did Peter Cushing get credit at the end of Rogue One?
It's a good question. Or Carrie Fisher,
I never
for that matter.
paid attention.
And we'll get into it a little bit with Dr. Sleep because we saw characters from the 1980s that are dead. Actors, but we
fascinatingly so, they did not use motion capture.
No, and I
new
actually
actors.
was very happy with that.
Yeah,
I thought that you knew who they were. You know, I mean, they did kind of go back and sugarcoat it a little bit by giving you little snippets from the original movie to kind of, oh yeah, by the way, this is that scene or this is that character, kind of a thing. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on James Dean.
And let's keep an eye to see if any of the earth moves on his grave as he's turning in it.
I want to know who they're going to bring back next.
Yeah, not a big news week this
No,
week. And
there was...
we're still pretty much, even though Halloween is done, we are still getting the after effects in the theaters at least. It's still very much scary movie season. And this is the reason we are covering Dr. Sleep.
Dr. Sleep.
Now, as you may know, those who listen to us every week, we're usually painfully obvious with what we pair a new movie up with in terms of classic. So we didn't want to go there. Obviously, the first thing you think of, well, let's do The Shining along with Dr. Sleep. But that's just maybe a little too much of a good thing.
I think we got enough of The Shining. We got enough of The Shining in this movie alone.
Yes, we did. But in order to prepare myself for Dr. Sleep, I did go back and watch the original Shining the night before I went to go see Dr. Sleep. And I'm glad I did because there's a lot of callbacks that maybe I would have missed had I not.
Now, see, I mean, I've seen The Shining once or twice over the years, and I understand what's going on. And the imagery in The Shining is so iconic. Even if you've never seen the movie, you know, Danny on the tricycle, just the patterns on that carpet.
Yeah.
You know, the stupid, the number. I knew the number of the door before I even went to it. The twins, the blood, all that stuff, to the point where Spielberg actually picked that up in Ready Player One. That was one of the levels in Ready Player One.
Yeah, you know what's funny is that watching Dr. Sleep, I was thinking more about Ready Player One, especially during the 237 scene than the original Shining.
Yep. So I did not go back and rewatch The Shining, but I don't think that it detracted or took away anything.
No, it's true. Although there's little Easter eggs here and there in Dr.
I'm
Sleep.
sure. Yeah. That, this is one thing I will say, that this movie is very much a love letter to that movie.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily the novel, right? Because we agree this is a direct sequel to the movie from 1980.
Well, it's both. It's actually both, because the filmmaker here and the director's name is Mike Flanagan.
Yep.
And he is a horror film director, and he really wanted Stephen King's approval. Not only was he looking to carry on the cinematic story that Kubrick started in the original Shining, but he also wanted King's approval, and King famously hates Kubrick's version of The Shining.
Right.
So Flanagan was very apprehensive about how he could pull this off by being true to the movie and what movie fans want to see, but yet also being true to King. So he kind of compromised where this is a sequel to both the novel and the movie. And we'll get into it a little bit of how he achieved that once we start talking about it.
Because I guess I never realized that this was a novel. Stephen King actually wrote a sequel to The Shining. Yes,
which I read, about a year after it was published. I was a little underwhelmed by the novel, I have to say. And I think the movie improves upon it.
Nice.
Dr. Sleep. So, I was surprised by that.
Okay. If anybody hasn't listened to us, we do spoil this.
Oh, yeah. And this has a lot of spoilers. See it first and then come back and listen, please.
Yeah. And then agree to disagree with us.
So first of all, let me just get into some of the original brouhaha around Stephen King and his opinion of The Shining. The reason he didn't like Kubrick's Shining is that he felt there was no transition scene in Jack Torrance's character from normal man with a drinking problem to possessed killer. It is true. A lot of the terror in the novel The Shining is that you take a normal dad and he slowly turns into the monster of the story. The loving father becomes something else by the end of the story because of this hotel. King was very upset because he saw Jack Nicholson as insane from the minute you see him on screen. And it's true.
He's a little off kilter. Just
true.
As an actor, right? Yeah.
There's the scene when they're driving up to the hotel for the first time, and he's bringing the family as they're driving, making the drive through those mountain roads to settle in at the hotel. Shelley Duvall, as Wendy Torrance, says, "Isn't this where the Donner Party got lost?" And Danny says, "Who's the Donner Party, Dad?" And with a grin on his face, "Well, they got lost up in the mountains, and they had to revert to cannibalism to survive." And Danny's like, "You mean they ate each other up?" With a grin on his face, "Yup, to survive." And
so right then and there, you're like, kind of set the tone.
And then Wendy's goes, "Jack." Danny says, "It's okay, Mom. I saw it on TV. I know about cannibalism." And then this is one of my favorite lines from The Shining. "You see, it's okay. He saw it on the television." And he's just with this maniacal grin on his face. And like, this guy can't wait to kill these two already.
Where's the axe? Give me some bourbon and an axe.
So that's a valid argument on King's part. He said that a lot of the terror in his novel was that this loving family man turns.
Just kind of unravels.
But he is already unraveled. And there a lot of reviewers actually agreed with it. And Cinefantastique, which is one of my favorite magazine
is that still out there?
Of all time. I don't know if they still publish that.
Oh my God, there were so many old good magazines back in the day.
There's a quote from the 1980 review of The Shining. "Instead of playing a normal man who becomes insane, Nicholson portrays a crazy man attempting to remain sane."
Wow, that's a good analogy. I mean, that's a good analysis of that.
So there's a few other key differences between the Shining novel and the Shining movie. The main one being is that the ending of both are completely different. There is no hedge maze in the novel. The end of the novel ends with Jack regaining his senses momentarily as he's being coerced by the spirits of the Overlook Hotel to kill his family. And so as he regains his senses, he runs down to the boiler room, sets everything on the highest level possible to blow up the hotel, and tells Wendy and Danny to get out while he does this, and sacrifices himself, and the hotel blows up. That's the end of the novel.
Wow. Well, that's almost like Superman 2.
Yeah, and Halloran lives. Scatman Carruthers lives in the novel. So he shows up, and not just to be dispatched, like within seconds of him walking through the door. Kubrick wanted something much more, I don't know, symbolic. Cinematic.
Well, cinematic, right, yeah. Yeah, because, that maze is very symbolic of, I guess,
it
his
is,
mind,
and it's one of the, it's indelible in movie-going history now. That's
like I said, there's so many iconic images. Whether you've actually seen this movie or not, there's certain, like, you see someone in that maze with the snow, and you immediately know it's The Shining.
So not only does Jack redeem himself at the end by regaining his sanity
just long enough to take it
to
out.
get his family out, but that never is shown in Jack Nicholson's portrayal. But still, it's a classic. How can you? That's like a signature role for Jack Nicholson. And
yes.
So I see Stephen King's point, but I still love The Shining as a movie.
Well, they do go out of their way to really revisit a lot of that stuff, especially later on in the movie.
We get into Dr. Sleep now, which is the grown-up Danny Torrance.
40 years later? Yeah. And they kind of banged it over the head a little bit with the 1980. I think there was a couple references. One being Aubra, the little girl's address was 1980.
Oh, really? You think I didn't even notice that? Kudos to you, Jeff.
I was on top of it. To a degree.
We start right off with that iconic carpet pattern. It kind of dissolves into the opening credits of Dr. Sleep. And you don't see carpet patterns like that anymore.
No.
That is 70s with those earth tones, oranges and maroons.
Yeah. And they're all like octagon shapes. As a kid, you probably would have wanted to jump from one to another. Like there was lava in between.
Right. And Danny, at one point in The Shining, is running his Hot Wheels over that carpet as if it's roads because of those shapes.
But we see it opens up with him on his tricycle, right? Or no?
They're trying to recreate that scene. Kubrick's camera following Danny on his big wheel, going through the halls of the Overlook, and it goes over the carpet. The wheels become silent. Then it goes on the hardwood floor. And then you hear, brrr, then it goes on the carpet, and it's silent again.
I will tell you, the sound in my theater was overwhelming. There were some moments where this, especially when you get in a couple like the jump scares or when they start getting into like the dream sequences, were so loud and just, jarring. But I think it kind of added to my intensity of it. It was
to your unease, maybe?
I wasn't uneasy. You know what? Ewan McGregor is easy on the eyes. He's a great. I don't want to take him home. My wife would probably kick me out.
Even with his Greg Allman beard phase at the beginning of this movie?
Yeah, this is the weird thing about this movie, which is it's like 3 different movies. First of all, it's 2.5 hours long.
It is.
I almost went to the Friday night showing at 10 o'clock, and I'm like, there is no way I will be sleeping. There's no way I can sit until 1 a.m. watching a movie.
There are a lot of quiet, contemplative moments in this movie, so it would be very easy to kind of drift off until the next jarring, jump scare.
Then I would have probably peed my pants and punched the guy next to me. I mean, Ewan McGregor's, I really liked him in this.
Yeah, he's very likable.
He was a very sympathetic character. They played enough. You got enough. So let me ask you this. So again, it opens up with little Danny. Is this all refilmed, or is this somehow like they picked up from Kubrick's film?
No, they refilmed. They refilmed everything, as far as I know.
Because when I look up on IMDb, the little boy, Danny, like they give Danny Boyd, the original little kid, credit
because he has a cameo as an adult in this. He is one of the baseball dads. Before the baseball boy gets abducted. He's the dad.
He makes that comment?
Yeah.
Watch that kid. Watch that kid. He's going to be a star one day or something?
Yeah.
Really? Okay, no. But I guess I misunderstood when I saw that they used the credit, because I put next to him that, did they use any original footage or did they go back?
I don't think so, because I was thinking myself the same thing during the beginning when they were following that big wheel.
Right, I'm like, how much of this is recreated and how much of this is
and you see the Peggy Fleming hairdo. I'm like, that's got to be the same kid. But then he turns his head when he goes past room 237.
And you can tell that. Well, you also right, okay, because you just watched The Shining beforehand, so you had a fresh. Because they bring in Catman Scrother. Well,
right, Dick Halloran is back.
Dick Halloran, yeah. So I was really fascinated with Danny's story, the fact that he kind of just drowned himself in alcohol to deal with this. And now here's the one thing I don't remember from The Shining, which was I thought it was all like this. It was the house, but according to this, the kid has powers.
Yes, and that's the reason he saw all these things in the hotel when he was a kid, because Halloran sits him down. Scatman Crothers at the beginning of The Shining sits him down as Jack and Wendy Torrance are being led around the hotel and given the tour. Dick Halloran warns Danny, saying, some buildings have the after effect like a piece of toast, like burnt toast, the after effect of what happened in the building. So whatever you see here, they're just pictures. So they set up the explanation that Danny's power, his shining, is so strong that he kind of willed those things unknowingly.
Gotcha. Okay, I've never taken that away from that movie.
No, so not from the original Shining. No, it's kind of ambiguous.
Okay, good. Right.
So Halloran kind of explains in Dr. Sleep that he didn't have the shining as powerfully as Danny did. So he didn't see the extent that Danny saw when they were in the hotel, or what it was doing to his father.
Gotcha.
So in the early moments of this movie, Dr. Sleep, we see Ewan McGregor as an adult Danny, and he's just a drifter, an alcoholic drifter who's trying to suppress all these memories. And the spirits of the Overlook are coming after him. As I said earlier, Halloran survives in the Shining novel. So in the Dr. Sleep novel, it's the actual Halloran who is guiding Danny as a kid through his formative years, because they moved to Florida because that's where Halloran lives in the novel. But in the movie, because he died in The Shining, it has to be a ghost.
But I like that. He's almost like Danny's Jiminy Cricket. He's his conscience. Every time he sees Danny doing something, he's like, "You're better than that. Come on, Danny. Leave her some money."
In the very beginning, he's at a bar. He gets into a fight, and the girl takes him home.
Yep.
And they're both drunk. And he wakes up the next morning.
She's doing coke.
There's vomit around her head. She's unconscious. And he gets up out of her purse, which is where Halloran comes and tries to talk him out of it. The 2 or 3-year-old kid comes out of the room, out of the other room, and Danny didn't even know that the kid was there. So he picks him up, gives him a bag of Cheetos, and puts him on the bed with his sleeping mother. And then you find out later that she was actually dead, which I doubt that he knew at the time.
Right, correct.
But and that the kid died too. It's terrible.
There's some really rough moments in this movie.
So that's not even the worst, but
no,
that experience is kind of a
sets the tone,
catalyst.
yeah.
It's kind of a catalyst for Danny's character to really get out of what he's been stuck in, this rut of trying to run away from his memories and from his past. So Halloran gives him a bit of advice where if any of these spirits come after him, he can mentally lock them in various boxes.
Yeah, he's like a Jedi Master now. He's like kind of teaching him how to suppress into.
Yeah. The old lady in the tub from room 237 visits him every night. Yeah. So at one point, Danny, taking Halloran's advice, confronts the spirit and locks her in a box in his head so she can no longer come after him.
Yeah, which I think is great. And of course, that plays out huge at the end of this movie.
So, and so by the time you get to the adult Danny, you see in his head, he's got all these boxes in the hedge maze. And they're like coffins, like lining the hedge maze of all these individual spirits that he's locked up that have come after him from the Overlook. Because they do explain in the movie that the Overlook was shuttered as soon as
they left.
They found Jack frozen in the hedge maze. So they never reopened the Overlook after that. And it's been just sitting there vacant.
That's prime real estate right there.
It is.
We talked about that in It. You're going to let that house just sit there dilapidated? But we get ahead of ourselves because
we do.
Then we got a long way to go before we get back to the Overlook.
Yeah, so Danny is trying to escape from his past, and he ends up, where was it, in New Hampshire that he
New
ends up?
Hampshire, which I think he was drawn there because you started, like I said, this is like 3 different storylines going on. And you get introduced to this little girl, Aubra, and she somehow has magic abilities. There's a birthday party going on. She's got a magician is there, and he's pulling rabbit out of the hat, and she goes, I can do magic. And then next thing you know, the parents walk in, and she's got all the spoons floating on the ceiling. But she was in New Hampshire. So I got the impression that he was somehow drawn. Yeah, he just got on a bus, and then he meets that guy, Billy, who I'm like, I know this guy. I had to look him up. The actor is Cliff Curtis, and he was just in Hobbs and Shaw and The Meg.
But he was also Fear the Walking Dead.
Fear the Walking Dead, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a good character. And it kind of gives Danny an opportunity to straighten out his life, gives him an apartment, which $85 a week for that apartment. That was a phenomenal little loft up there. He stayed there 8 years. He never left. I wonder if his rent went up.
One of the walls was painted with
that was a neat little thing, right? The landlady makes a little mention that the guy previous to her asked to have it painted
because
like
he was a school teacher, right?
He was a school teacher, something like that, mathematician.
And that's how Abra, or how do they pronounce her name?
Well, it's abracadabra.
Like abracadabra.
I'm thinking Abra.
So that's how they communicate. And he doesn't even know who she is at first.
No, all of a sudden he wakes up one morning, there's a little hello on there. And you know it's her because she makes the little, out of the O, she makes a smiley face. And you see that when she was at her birthday party. She made a little sign for her mom or something like that. And it was
apparently Abra has this shining stronger than anybody else on the face of the earth. So she finds Danny, and then he kind of doesn't know it, but that's, as Jeff said, that's probably why he ends up in New Hampshire, is he's drawn to her as well.
And they just kind of communicate. Every day he wakes up, morning, and he would write, I guess he must have figured out that she was a kid, because then he would just write school, or he would write something, just one word little sentences. Which is weird in itself, but I guess after what this kid has experienced, like that's the least of his worries, that he's getting magic messages through a chalkboard. He's like, oh, well, I'm going to work. But at the same time, we're also introduced to a third storyline, which is, now I guess that this group had a name. I never caught it in the movie itself. Yeah,
they're called the True Knot, like Knot, Knot.
I did not catch that.
They're pretty much vampires.
They are soul-sucking vampires. That's
like
exactly
the
what they
Skeksis
are.
from Dark Crystal.
Yeah, literally sucking the soul out of your body. But I will tell you, this girl, so the main character, her name is Rose the Hat. And you see her early on. That's another one too, where she abducts this little girl. She's almost like Frankenstein at the side of the water. The little girl,
flowers, yeah.
Yes, gets a little girl to come and smell the flowers. And next thing you know, they're surrounded by friends, 8 of her quote unquote friends. Oh no, those are my friends. And they just hold her down and suck them.
And they put the rest of the essence in a canister. So, to save for later.
It's a like Stark level technology in these canisters. Who's making these things?
That's the thing, because there's a throwaway line a little bit later on that Danny says, don't bother calling the police. I have the feeling these people are rich and connected. So, but that's you never go anywhere beyond that. So you don't know what their capabilities are really.
And they are like so you see the scene where they recruit the one new girl who they end up calling Snakebite, Andy. and they convert her. Right. So it's almost like the Lost Boys. I'm going to bite you, and now you're going to be one of the undead.
So yeah, you get the feeling that this group, they only feed on kids that have this shining ability, that
And I
have
think
some
that,
kind of psychic ability.
right, yes. And that makes, they don't even refer to it as, do they call it the shine?
No,
Essence
they
or
just call it steam, actually.
steam. Yeah, there you go. Which makes sense because not everyone would know to call it the shining.
Correct. Yeah, only Danny knows to call, and Halloran knew to call it the shining.
Right. But these characters are so reprehensible that they get what you have to build that up. I mean, they're abducting and killing little children.
And you have to show that in order to show their threat.
That was bad. But I will say, this girl, Rebecca Ferguson, who plays Rose the Hat, I don't think I've been so enamored with somebody on screen since Gal Gadot on Wonder Woman. I mean, you put that hat and the hippie clothes on her, and I'm just like, in the immortal words of Wayne and Garth, Sha Wing. I could not stop watching her. I was like, she was like,
well, that character actually needs that because she has to be completely coercive. And
yeah, I would have been victim. She would have just sucked the essence right out of me.
Now, apparently, because you do actually see this group recruit a 15-year-old kid who has the ability. So now they're also looking for people with abilities.
To keep, right, because you get it from one of the other characters, Crow Daddy, that he was implying that it's getting harder and harder for them to find people who have this steam that they can feed off. And he's like, I don't know if it's Netflix, I don't know if it's video games, but something is happening.
But they're also looking for people to be within their coven can also give something to the coven. And so this girl has the ability to kind of take over your mind. So which would come in very handy to abduct kids.
Yeah, she kind of had like the power of suggestion.
Yeah. So if you have these abilities, they either want you to become one of them or they're going to feed on you, depending on what your power is.
Yeah. So at some point, she comes in contact with Abra.
Because she just senses her from across the country, because this Rose the Hat, part of her ability is to track down where these kids are that have this shining ability.
And that was some really neat kind of visual moments where she is almost, sitting on top of the roof of her Winnebago from hell. She's like Professor Xavier looking for mutants. She's just kind of reaching out, but you see her kind of like floating through the sky, and she's passing all these cityscapes. It was kind of neat little.
You know what it was like? It was like the dude from The Big Lebowski during that one.
Yes.
I am waiting for that Bob Dylan song to come on.
Yeah, you're right, though. That was, I thought those were neat little moments. But yeah, so like I said, you got these three kind of different storylines that are all about to converge.
As good as Rebecca Ferguson was in this role, and we didn't mention that she is also Tom Cruise's love interest in the Mission Impossible movies.
Yep.
That's where you've seen her before if you think that she's familiar. But the hat really made her look like that girl from Four Non-Blondes from the 90s.
Oh, yes, yeah. Well,
I kept thinking she was going to start, yeah. What's going on?
Yeah, but she was stuck in the 70s. She had those hippie clothes.
Yeah, you didn't know because
the
the only one
hair and the flowers.
There is an old man member of the True Knot and you get a sense that he's lived for a very long time.
Yeah, she does make a story. You've seen empires fall, kings die. That was Carol Strucken, who was Lurch in the new version of the Addams Family the last couple of years.
Nice.
That came out in probably the 90s. Grandpa Flick was his name.
Right. So he is the senior member of the True Knot. And you maybe think that maybe he was the one that turned Rose the Hat.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because you never really, right. There's only like 7 or 8 of them. It's not like a large group, right? And you led to believe maybe there's others out there like them.
But they make no bones about the fact that they're hungry and that there's fewer and fewer kids as time goes on. That have this
she's
ability.
She's got a couple of those little canisters kind of hidden away.
Yeah.
And they talk about the steam like it's a vintage wine. They're like, oh, about that little boy in Iowa, and you're just like, all right, fine.
And that's why they want Abra so badly, is because she's so powerful. This will probably feed them for years to come if they get this steam.
And they don't. It's brutal. So what really happens is they abduct this little boy at a baseball field.
And let me just point out that he is played by Jacob Tremblay, who was in Room with Brie Larson, and he was also in a very recent comedy called Good Boys
yes,
which was
okay.
kind of like Superbad. So
Little
he
kids.
is like a name child actor. And I was reading about this scene because it is very upsetting, especially if
Oh,
you're
it's
a parent.
horrible. It is
So,
absolutely horrible.
and he so sells the scene of not only being abducted, but as they're sucking the soul out of him, he's crying. He's like, no, no, no.
Yeah, I
And
won't tell. I won't tell.
he was putting off the actors, Rebecca Ferguson and the rest. They're like, I can't do this. It's like, he's too good.
Yeah. Well, and they basically horse tie him,
Yeah.
4 pins on the ground, and they just start stabbing him. And what's happening is that Abra picks up on this, and so now she's somewhere in New Hampshire. This, I think, it was in Iowa, right? This is where they tracked him down.
That's where
the
they abducted him.
cornfields.
That's where the
Yep.
kid was.
And she's watching this all unfold, and she's screaming. I mean, that's just as disturbing as the kid being killed itself, is that she's screaming, "They're killing him!" And the parents are like, "What the f- is going on?" It was a very intense scene.
And that's where she tells Danny, because the whole of his wall cracks because she's so upset. And then she
Right.
sees the word red drum in the mirror.
Yep.
When it's actually
Murder.
murder, she writes out, and baseball boy underneath it.
Yes. Yeah, because he writes back, "Who?" She writes "baseball
Yeah.
boy."
So then she actually physically reaches out to Danny, finds him in New Hampshire, and tells him this story about what happened to this kid and that he has to help her. And it's funny, he tells her, an adult male meeting with a little girl like this does not look good.
The dad actually, immediately assumes that when he does meet him.
Yeah.
But there's an 8-year time jump because he's now settled in this town and he's an orderly, and that's where we get the title Dr. Sleep. So again, like I'm saying, 3 hours. This movie's there's a lot to cram in here.
There's a lot to take in.
But he's an orderly at this assisted living facility.
Yeah, it's
I
an
guess.
old age home, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
And the cat. There's a cat in this building that, they always say that animals are aware when death is close. And we get this kind of exposition from one of the guys who's about to die that the cat comes and sits at his feet. Danny walks in. He's like, "You want me to get a nurse?" And he goes, No. You're where you need to be. And that old man realizes he's going to die. And then Danny kind of like just talks to him. This is what he's meant to be. The guy actually calls him, "You're Dr. Sleep. This is where you need to be. You're comforting me." And because he has that ability to kind of see things, and you saw that when he went to the AA meeting and he met the doctor for the first time, and then the guy's like rubbing his wrist, and he's like, "Oh, you're concerned about your watch? You took it off when you were washing your hands." So he sees this stuff. So he's able to pull kind of these memories out of these old people's heads, and "Oh, you're going to be reunited with your wife, or remember that time you were on the porch," and it just kind of like comforts them. So I really like that because it was just this character coming to terms with,
and he's got experience with the afterlife as well, and he can truthfully tell them that you will go on.
Yeah,
it does not end.
He does say that numerous times. Yeah, this is not the end.
Yeah,
we do go on, and I really I like that because I thought it was just a human. I mean, obviously we stray far from that. So
his character has found redemption in this ability, and now he's using the ability for good. That's the way that he can justify it. Justify having it.
I really like that.
So yeah, as you said, 8 years go by and he has ingratiated himself into this community as Dr. Sleep. So he's working as an orderly at this assisted living home when Abra finds him as a young tween. Yeah. And that's when she has this vision of the baseball boy. And that's
then she goes to him and she's like, we have to find him. And she was able to see that one of the gang had touched the baseball mitt. He had actually put it on. If I can get that mitt and I can touch it, I can tell you where they're going and who they are. And of course, he's like, "Well, I'm not doing anything like that. You run, you hide, you stay as far away from people like this as possible." Because he knows. I lived in a place that fed on people like this, and no part of it.
But of course, he got second thoughts after he thinks about it for a while.
Yeah. So he suckers his friend Billy.
Now, this was a little bit undercooked, I thought, in the movie. In the book, Danny is very well known as being Dr. Sleep, and Billy knows this about him. So Billy in the book knows already that he has some kind of ability that is beyond. Yeah. So that's how he buys Danny's story about this in the book, and it's more believable than just going on blind faith.
Here it's just kind of like, "I'm going to tell you a story, and you're not going to believe it," and then they just cut to the two of them in a car. So obviously Billy believed it, but
Yeah, in the book, he's already this existential, like very strange. Billy knows this about Danny, so he believes him immediately. That this.
But
is
that's another
real.
disturbing image as well, because as they're going out there, so he's explained it, and she's in the car with them because she's now telepathically talking with Danny, but you see her physically in the car. Billy doesn't see her,
right?
But Danny does, and they're having this communication, and Billy's like, you know what, we're screwed either way, because if you're wrong, then my friend is just straight up nuts. But if we're right, then we're gonna uncover a dead boy, and that's exactly what they do. And that's
now I assume that they also make an anonymous call to the police, because part of the reason that Abra wanted him to go was that he could have a proper burial.
Right. So they drive all the way to Iowa, dig this kid up, and come back with the MIP. Because at this point she's been toying with Rose. They're inside each other's minds. And
as Rose is trying to figure out where this girl is so they can go feed on her.
Yeah, so they realize that, you know what, it's only a matter of time before they pinpoint where you are. We need to make a stand. So, I mean, it was a half-baked plan, like an ambush. They don't know what they're up against. They don't know how many people they're up against. But
that's the point where Abra's mother goes away to visit her sick grandmother at one point, only leaving her at home with her father. And that's when Danny and Billy show up at their front door. Yeah. And that's where Abra's father is like about to...
Yeah. How dare you? She's 13 years old.
It's like one of these Nightline exposés.
You got what's the guy's name? He's waiting at your door. You here to see a little 13-year-old kid?
So that's the scenario. That's what it looks like when Danny shows up. And so the father, of course, is going to think that this guy is
But Danny's like, I told you to show him. Well, I tried to explain. No. Show him. And that's where she projects the kids being killed in her dad's head.
So now he knows that, he's on the
because the parents know that something's up with her, but they kind of like most parents, you kind of like looking the other way. Go, you know what? I can't deal with this. She's talking to dead people. She's like, no, we're not going to deal with it. We're going to pretend it didn't happen. So now all of a sudden she's on the run with them, and they decide to make this stand. It's going to be a trap. Rose, meanwhile, tries to get inside Abra's head and is completely messed up. And that scene where she's in, so their brains almost look like libraries, and she's got filing cabinets, and she's reaching into the filing cabinet, and Abra just closes it on her hand, crushing her hand. And as she's pulling it out, this to me was rough as well, which was like the skin is peeling off the back of her knuckles, her fingers are all mangled. And I'm like, who hasn't shoved their hand into one of those metal filing cabinets? I could just feel it. I was like, oh. So she stays behind.
Because her number one guy, what was his name? Crow Dog or something?
Crow Daddy.
Crow Daddy.
I thought at one point that was...
I thought it was a Backstreet Boy.
Lamos.
He looked just like one of those Backstreet Boys. I don't know which one it was, but... I could have pictured that whole True Knot group going into Backstreet, all right. But Rose stays behind because Crow Daddy is convinced that Abra knows too much about her, and she would see her coming from a mile away. Yeah. So smartly, Rose does stay behind because that's what would have happened, and everybody else in the True Knot goes after Abra.
But then she quickly realizes it's a trap, it's an ambush.
Yeah, and in the course of this, Abra's dad, the hapless father figure here, gets stabbed by Crow Daddy.
I didn't like that.
The gang of 6 or so of the True Knot, they have a confrontation with Danny and Billy in the woods, where Danny and Billy manage to take out the entire team.
And they're taken out just like vampires. You shoot them in the head, they just turn into dust.
But not before screaming. They do have a little bit of a showdown with the 15-year-old girl who tries to take over Danny's mind and almost succeeds.
Yeah, but then she takes over Billy as she's laying there. Shoot yourself in the head.
No! Yeah, so Billy doesn't make it out of this ambush. But the only one of the True Knot that's not there in the forest is Crow Daddy. He goes right to Abra's house, kills the father, and abducts Abra by injecting her.
Because you realize that she never really left the house either.
It's like a Luke kind of a deal, the Last Jedi kind of a deal, where she's even cross-legged sitting on the kitchen island,
you're right.
just like Luke was
on
the mountain.
Come for me. You're right. Come for me. Yep. Yeah, so she was projecting herself.
I would assume that Crow Daddy does the same thing to the real Abra when she's sitting there in her Zen yoga state. Probably injects her with a drug right there.
Yeah.
After he kills the father.
Yeah, because the next thing you see is that he's driving back and she's secured in the back seat. He tells her that, no, I drugged you. Your special little abilities are hidden away. She's screwed. She's screwed. Danny's screwed. His buddy's dead. He doesn't know where they are. So he does. What does he do? He reaches out to her, right? How did he get in contact with her? Because she was drugged.
I don't think he ever really realized the full potential of his power.
His own.
He pushes the limit of his power, and he finds
her. And so then he takes over her body, which is great. And all of a sudden she sits up and she starts talking to Crow. He realizes
Danny
pretty quickly
to Crow through Abra.
Yes, and he realizes pretty quickly he's not talking to Abra. And he goes, "Who are you?" "You're the guy who killed my other crew." He goes, "Oh, real interesting." He goes, "I guess it makes sense that you're immortal, that you didn't put your seatbelt on." And then she slams the car into a tree.
And he flies out of the windshield of the car. It's a very satisfying scene.
"I hope that hurts," she says. So now she's just all alone walking the woods.
They've killed all of the True Knot except for Rose the Hat, who stayed behind.
Now you're like, all right, here we go. And so where does Danny want to go for a standoff?
Yeah, so Danny finds her. He picks her up. And, as you started to say, where do they go?
Right to the Overlook.
And she's like, why? Why are you bringing us here? You said it's dangerous.
Right.
Because, well, if it's dangerous for us, then it's got to be dangerous for her, too, is the assumption.
Yeah, so at this point, he's willing to just lay it all out there.
And this is where, let me just bring this up now. This is where the movie careens wildly away from Dr. Sleep, the novel, because... as I said, in the Shining novel, the Overlook doesn't exist in Dr. Sleep. It is blown up at the end of the Shining.
Right.
So they have their final confrontation by where the Winnebagos are in the woods, right? So it doesn't happen at the Overlook. But the director and the writer, Mike Flanagan, brilliantly kind of aligns the movie, The Shining, so he manages in this one fell swoop to make it a sequel to the novel and a sequel to the movie all at once. Stephen King was right on board with this once Flanagan
it makes perfect sense.
It
is full circle. And like I said, this is very much a love letter to that original movie. And it is satisfying. I mean, you know what's coming. It's a little far-fetched to a certain degree.
And that's why I was underwhelmed with the book, because it didn't really bring that Shining story full circle. But the movie does. And so that's why I think the movie is more satisfying than Dr. Sleep, the novel.
And it was great because he's like, all right, you stay in the car. You're going to see her a mile away. Let me go in. I got to wake up this house. And that's what he does. Yeah,
he turns the boiler on. He turns all the lights on and goes through those iconic cinematic sets, set pieces that doors, you are burned in your head from The Shining. He goes into the gold ballroom and he sits down at the bar, just like Jack did, just like his father did. And who shows up but Lloyd the bartender? But it's not the same Lloyd that you remember from The Shining. It's Jack. Yeah. It's Jack Torrance's character sitting there.
But again, like we said before, I'm glad they didn't try to CG and make it Jack Nicholson. You knew enough that it was the character.
Now, do you know who played Jack Torrance in Dr. Sleep?
No.
That is Henry Thomas from E.T.
Get out of here. No, I did not know that.
I was aghast when I saw that. No way. Aghast because I didn't realize it. Not that I'm so upset that Henry Thomas is playing Jack Torrance, but I didn't realize it.
No, you don't know. And it wasn't like he was going overboard trying to be Jack Nicholson.
No, he wasn't.
No. But
that was the brilliance of that scene, because he wasn't Jack Torrance. He was Lloyd the bartender. Danny is trying to get his father out of Lloyd the bartender, and then he finally sees him a little bit at the end of the scene.
Yeah.
But it's a brilliant,
that was very well done.
Scene.
It was good. I liked it.
And he's just doing enough of Nicholson because he's got the hair, he's got that grin, that maniacal grin going, but he doesn't try to do an impersonation.
Just a little eyebrow movement there. Yeah, he's trying to get Danny to take a drink.
So he succeeds in waking up the house as he said he was going to do. Then he goes outside, he gets Abra, and they go back in and they try to lure Rose the Hat into the Overlook.
Complete with hatchet in hand.
With hatchet in hand, yes.
Yes.
And it's almost like, it's funny because they have their final showdown in that big lounge room where Jack was typing his novel.
Still sitting there.
Still sitting there. The typewriter
still sitting there.
The Overlook has remained unchanged from the
Yeah.
events of The Shining. They just abandoned the place, apparently, as soon as they...
I heard there's ghosts in there.
Danny and Rose the Hat have a showdown, much like Wendy and Jack Torrance do at the end of The Shining, where Wendy's got the baseball bat in her hand, walking backwards up the stairs.
Right.
And she's like, get away from me. Get away from me. He's like, Wendy, light of my life. I just want to bash your brains in. But it's Rose the Hat who's kind of walking up the stairs as Danny's walking up slowly backwards with the axe, knowing that he can't really take her out by himself.
No.
And there's a great scene because this is the first time that Rose is aware of Danny.
Yes.
Like, where have you been?
Where have you been?
How did I miss you?
Yep.
And she's kind of trying to talk him into joining her, it sounds like.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, because she realizes the potential. Well, she doesn't have anybody left now.
No, she's alone.
He's taken them all out. So she's like, you know what?
You could live forever, or you could live a long time if you come.
Like a friggin' the Emperor trying to turn Luke. So yeah, and it's not going to go well for Danny.
No.
And
so he has a little bit of an altercation, right, with Rose,
because she's like, "Are we going to do this?" And then boom, it's just in. She's all over him.
And that's when he unleashes his secret weapon. All
Which
those
is
coffin
brilliant.
boxes in his head from the hedge maze, he unleashes them all. He opens them all up so they consume Rose the Hat.
And that's a pretty satisfying scene right there. Not before he gets an axe to his inner thigh, thus cutting his artery, and he's bleeding out.
She informs him that she's cut one of his arteries and that he's going to bleed out. The spirits of the Overlook consume Rose the Hat. So problem number one taken care of.
I mean, it's all those iconic characters. It's the lady in the tub. It's the twins.
Yeah.
Yep. It's the butler. It's very satisfying to see this unfold. And they're putting their hands underneath her facial skin. And and she's just screaming in agony.
And they consume her just the same way that the True Knot, consumed all these kids that you see earlier on in the movie.
Yeah, so it was very satisfying.
So it kind of ties them to the Overlook as well. So it all is, circular, and it all kind of makes sense in a weird way. But now that Danny has unleashed these spirits, he can't really, he's helpless against them.
Yep.
So they take him over in the same way that they took his father over, and he goes after Abra with the axe.
I thought that was a little too on the nose.
Right.
Now he's chasing her through the hallway, and he's limping. He's got the axe in his hand. One eye's white, and it's just, here we go. And where does she go? Into the room.
And that's where they have their confrontation. And she actually, very much like the Shining novel, she actually connects with Danny. And
she pulls him out. She
pulls him out for a second. And this is how Flanagan, he wanted to give Stephen King the ending that Kubrick never gave him. He really makes the ending of Dr. Sleep the ending of the Shining novel, where Danny, rather than Jack Torrance, is the one that, wakes up, regains his sanity, and then realizes that he can destroy this place, and sacrifice himself in doing so.
But he'd already set that in motion.
He had set that in motion when he first opened up the hotel.
Because at one point, he's like, what you don't realize is that Danny's turned the boiler on, and you're all going to go boom.
So that's the ending of the movie, is that the hotel blows up just as
it
did.
With Danny in it.
With Danny in it.
Leaving that poor little girl. Thank God those police arrived just as the thing's burning to the ground.
Maybe she could have attempted to drive one of those vehicles down the
right?
road. Who knows?
So yeah, she's miraculously saved. Her dad's dead. Cut to, I don't know how long later, she's back home. Mom's still kind of like, I don't know if I trust you. Something weird going on. But she's talking with Danny because he's still alive.
Yeah, and apparently, she's told her mother the entire story because the mother knows who Danny is.
Right.
So yeah, she's talking with Danny, but then you realize it's his ghost.
His ghost.
Very much like Halloran used to visit him.
Now he's in, because Halloran actually said, you have to pass this on. You have to find somebody that you can help, and that's exactly what he does. And he's kind of like at peace with it. So
and
I really like this.
Yeah, there's a lot to chew on, and it's a lot to think about after you watch this movie, especially watching The Shining right beforehand. And I just loved how it all tied everything together in a nice little bow. It was very satisfying. It was very.
It's funny because we complain about stuff like that in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
It's like, why does everything have to connect? But in this regard, it works, and you don't need to be entrenched in The Shining. Like I said, I've seen it over the years a couple times. You know enough about what's going on. This is This is a really great movie.
It is. It's a lot better than it deserves to be. Because going into it, you're thinking, okay, there's no way they could live up to the original.
No.
I didn't have a lot of expectations going into
but
this.
they did their own thing. It's not the psychological, mishmash that the Shining is, where it's just this character breaking down. You're just seeing this de-evolution of a human. This is something different. It's a little more actiony. A little more, like I said, some of the set pieces, the ambush was kind of ill-conceived, action sequence, but you had to find some way to get rid of those other characters. So that really just comes down to Rose. And
the fact that they have this true knot ring of vampires in there, so it makes it more of a story of just Danny revisiting his demons of The Shining.
Right.
There's something else at stake here. There's a whole other plot line that you didn't see from the original. So like you said, it brings something new to the table while being true to the original at the same time. And it really gets you invested in the movie. The performances are great.
Yes, I mean, that little girl is really put together. She's a pretty damn good actress.
Yeah, she is. And forget baseball boy, Jacob Tremblay. This kid sells it to the nth degree, his scene. It is so
heart-wrenching.
We have to warn people because it is intense. But again, you need that in order to establish their threat.
Correct. Yeah. But it's not a horror movie. It's not, to me, it's not like these stupid Annabelle possessed dolls and some of this other stuff. Because the director, what was that? Haunting on Hill House or House Hill or something?
Yeah, he does a Netflix show, right?
The Haunting of House Hill. It's a Hulu, actually.
Which Henry Thomas stars in as well.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So there you go on that. Again, those are not in my wheelhouse in any way, shape, or form. But this was very good. I'm
going to go up there with buckets. I'm thinking I'm going to give this a solid maybe 4.25.
Wow. I was leaning toward 4. So it is well done. It is very well done. And McGregor carries this movie because there's a fair amount of upfront where it's all on his shoulders. It's really, and he's not, I mean, you get the fact that, as a kid, this is what he went through, and you see the flashbacks with him and his mom. And I thought they did a really good job of recasting that character. She had just enough fake teeth, but he wasn't completely unredeemable. He did seem like he was at the bottom of his barrel, kind of a thing. But you still, you rooted for him. Yeah, I'll go for it.
Ewan McGregor, very likable as an actor.
Yes.
So much you don't even blink an eye when, during that scene where he realizes that the mother and the baby are dead. That might have been irredeemable for any other actor to pull off. The audience may not have been down with him for the rest of the movie, but you're like, it's Ewan McGregor. It's all right.
It's Ewan McGregor.
Walk it off. You'll be all right. Yeah.
But he was about as horrified as the audience.
Yeah.
When you realize what it is you're looking at, and you're like, oh my gosh.
Now, before we leave the Overlook Hotel, I always like to pull something out of the bag. This intermission clip that I've got here is an old, very 50s drive-in ad that speaks to the mom of the family. So I thought maybe Wendy Torrance would need some cooking tips as well. So this pretty much tells the mom, hey, you're going to the drive-in, have dinner here. Don't bother cooking tonight.
Don't bother cooking. I like it.
You can have a nutritious meal right here at the drive-in concession stand. So take a listen to this and we'll be right back.
Hey, Mom. Yes, you. Why fuss and fret about dinner? Why not have it right here? Yes, this drive-in offers everyone in the family a real picnic treat for dinner. We've got delicious sandwiches with all the trimmings and your other dinner favorites, plus whatever you want to drink, hot or cold. Come early before the show starts, or eat while you're being entertained, or at intermission time. So why fuss? Give your family a tasty dinner at this drive-in.
Okay, we are back, and we like Ewan McGregor so much that we figured today's episode should be a double feature featuring Ewan. We didn't quite want to go as far as the prequels. That would be the second most obvious thing after you picking The Shining. So
right. So you chose a movie I've never heard of.
Now, this movie was the first time really that Ewan made any kind of an impact. His first major film role. And it's called Shallow Grave. from 1994. I think it was released in the States in 95.
I find it funny. We actually had a Shallow Grave reference in Dr.
We
Sleep.
did.
Right? When they're digging up that poor kid, I'm like, that's pretty impressive.
So this, directed by Danny Boyle. Also
Danny Boyle.
Oh, Danny Boyle. This is the first feature film of his as well. So,
And you really start to see kind of his trademark, I guess. Some of the, like the opening sequence is this manic camera going through the city kind of a thing. Danny Boyle's got a really weird sensibility.
Yeah,
to me, it's at borders like BBC.
Yeah,
you know?
this movie fits arm in arm, I think, with Trainspotting as well,
Yes,
which was his next.
which is a much darker movie. I mean, this does go dark places.
But it's really, this is almost like a black comedy. It's in
I was going to
spots.
say, I think the characters are a little more likable. Yeah, it reminded me very much, which came after the fact, which was Very Bad Things.
Yes.
You know, which is just, you know, one stupid event just befalls all of these characters. And one by one, they just kind of get taken down by it.
Now, you just mentioned that these characters are likable. I'm not quite so sure I would go that far.
I liked Alex. I liked Ewan McGregor. Like you said, you could see his star quality all over this.
He is.
Eccleston,
even though he is not the main character here, he steals all the scenes that he's in. Definitely.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you want to say that he's kind of like the voice of the audience a little bit?
Yeah,
like
I would say that he is.
You know, right.
These three 20-somethings that live in Scotland, in Edinburgh, I think.
Yeah, I'll take that.
They're looking for a fourth flatmate. They all live together. There's David, who's played by Christopher Eccleston, who we know a little bit later as Doctor Who.
Which is funny because all the doors in that apartment were blue, so they look like the TARDIS.
Oh, yeah.
Like, did we know then that he would become Doctor Who?
Perhaps. It was a little foreshadowing, yeah.
Right.
And we also know him very well as Malekith, the Dark Elf.
The Dark Elf.
In Thor Dark World. So he is a Marvel Cinematic Universe character as well, is Christopher Eccleston. We've got Ewan McGregor as Alex. So I'm getting ahead of myself. David is an accountant, so he's the most straight-laced and businesslike.
He's a little too buttoned up.
And he's a little bit high-strung as well.
Yes, yeah.
So then we have Alex, who is the lazabout of the flatmates. Now, he does seemingly have a career as a journalist, but you rarely see him at work. He's mostly watching TV at home.
Doing research, probably.
Juliet, who's the female member of this trio, played by Carrie Fox. Now, apparently, she was the most famous of the three at the time this movie was released because she was like an indie cinema darling. And she is a physician of some kind or works at a hospital or...
Yes, yeah. Yeah, because at one point he even says, "But Juliet, you're a doctor. You kill people every day." You know, because they were. There's a great opening scene where they're just interviewing all these potential roommates, and it's just hysterical. There's just these quick little cuts. You know,
and they're
these
just
people
so
coming
cutting and mean. They're
Yes,
it
yeah.
seems like they're only interviewing people to make fun of them, and that's they don't actually need a roommate.
Right, because they're actually laughing at some of these people. At one point, he even says, "You ever killed a man?" And then you cut to a picture of the guy killing someone at an ATM. it's really. Yeah, the interviews, the upfront interviews, are very hysterical.
And that poor red-haired guy, what was his name? Do you remember?
The red-haired guy?
The red-haired guy that they make fun of ruthlessly in the beginning.
No, I don't remember what his name was. I just remember Hugo. That's the one that moves in with him.
He's the one that moves in, yeah. So Carrie Fox, again, I don't think she's taken any kind of a Hippocratic oath, this doctor, if she is a doctor. Right. Maybe they don't do that in Scotland. But she has such impressive Austin Powers style teeth. At first, my first thought was Mr. Ed. And then I'm thinking,
Wilbur.
You know, if you need, a can of beer opened, you go right to her. She could do it for you.
Carrie, you got me.
So they go through a litany of interviews for a fourth flatmate, and they turn them all down, laughing at their back as they go out of the apartment until they come upon Hugo. Now, Carrie meets him first, and he kind of charms his way in, and she's convinced that she wants him to be their fourth flatmate. Now, you don't really know what the relationship is between these three.
Or how they met, right?
Like, are they intimate together, or does she go out with one of them? You don't really know. But Carrie does take a shine to this Hugo, or Juliet takes a shine to this Hugo, who presents himself very innocently as a writer. But, you do get some flashes of him he's tied somehow to some kind of organized crime ring in Scotland. And he's got a suitcase full of cash. Was it £1 million? Did they say how much it was?
I don't remember.
million?
I don't remember them ever saying exactly how much it was. It was a lot of money.
He moves in. He's got a suitcase full of money, and he puts himself in his room right away. Dies, it seemingly, almost immediately upon moving in.
Yeah, immediately. So, of course, yeah, two of them are like, we got to tell someone. And that's when Alex is like, go ahead, call the police. Tell them there's a suitcase full of money and you don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
So he immediately is like, let's dispose of the body. Nobody knows he's here. Genius.
And it's just a very disturbing scene because when they break down the door, of course, Hugo is naked.
Right, yeah.
Just sprawled out on the bed.
Sprawled across his bed.
Yeah, so they keep him there for a couple of days as they figure out what to do.
Oh my gosh!
So he's just there. So of course they have to do something before he starts to smell up the place. They're going to have to dismember this body, bury it in a shallow grave out in the woods. Hence the title. It seems that David, that Christopher Eccleston plays, he is the one most reticent about doing this. So they come up. First, they're all going to do it, and they're all going to take equal parts in dismembering the body and destroying the teeth and just making this body untraceable.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. So they figured out, right? Like, would you think to like bash the teeth out?
And then what do you do with them after that?
Well, you're going to have to do something. I don't know, but at least bury them somewhere else so they're not associated with the.
Yeah, you don't really know what they did with the teeth.
No,
that's what they figure they have to do.
And there's a scene where they're actually like in a hardware store buying all this stuff that to me was like a red flag right there. It's like, oh, we're going to need this shovel and we're going to need this body bag. And well, look over here. We got some pliers that we can cut the pieces of. Saw. We need a saw. Yeah, poor David draws the short straw on this one.
So he's the one that has to saw off the feet and hands because that's where that you can get the fingerprints. I don't know. Yep. Can you get fingerprints off of feet? Is that possible?
I don't know.
Was that even necessary to saw off the guy's feet?
Yeah, listen, if you're going to add insult to injury.
Right.
I think Hugo just got the job because he played a dead good guy. A good dead guy.
Dead guy. Yeah.
Dead good guy.
So David draws the short straw, and he's the one that ends up having to saw off the hands and feet of the corpse. And also, does he smash in the teeth as well? Or is that
no, I think Alex does that.
Yeah, Alex does that. So they bury the body, and then they go about their merry way with this cash. And as you're getting little bits of Juliet and Alex spending some money on a camcorder, which they pay $500 for, 500 pounds for.
Which, he's like, when you bought that? What'd you buy that for?
Now, that was, if you think about it, that was a novelty to have back in the early 90s, a camcorder like that, a state-of-the-art camcorder. But as you're seeing bits of the flatmates trying to enjoy themselves, now David is against them spending any of this money because he's worried that it's going to be traceable.
Yeah.
Because he's an accountant,
so he knows
it
came from. Right, you don't know where it came from. And
so,
that's the problem you get.
There's a very good point that Alex brings up. Well, why did we do this then if we're not going to do anything with this money? So, but then you're getting scenes of these two thugs who are looking for Hugo and looking for this money that are just killing people around. Yeah,
you would have to stop. If you took 2 seconds to backtrack and be like, all right, where did he get this money from? And could there be somebody looking for it?
Yeah.
Right? You didn't just empty out your bank account one day and carry it around in a suitcase. The other thing they did was they dumped his car in like one of those
a quarry.
Which it sank at like 12 feet, and you can still see it.
You can see it clear as day if you look into the water. Yeah,
it's like that didn't work out so well for you.
So you see the thugs trace the car somehow back to this quarry, and then they also kind of pinpoint that he moved into this flat. They didn't know exactly what apartment, so at one point they break into an apartment downstairs.
Down the stairs, and
David wakes up from a sound sleep because he hears something downstairs, and
but that's great because you get the feel because at first you think that they're breaking into their flat.
Yeah,
you get the impression that they're coming through their door, and then you realize it's down the hall.
Yep.
And I'm like, all right, but they're getting close, and that's the one thing I'll say, which is there's a lot of this spiral staircase imagery that he tends to use in these cutaway shots. That to me was just indicative. It was just, the fact that there's twists and turns in this story, and these guys are just spiraling. It's not going to end well.
And you get a foreshadowing of that because David kind of goes off the rails at this point.
David really goes off the rails.
He's getting more paranoid by the day, so he decides to take this money, hide it in like a water chest up in the attic.
Yeah, that was bizarre.
I don't know what that was for, or
because he climbs up into the attic, right? And it's like a tub of water that he's hermetically sealed or taped up the suitcase and then immersed it in water.
And then he decides not only to do that, but to live up there in the attic, kind of
he's
guarding
drilling
this
holes.
money.
He's drilling holes in the ceiling.
So
he can
he's
see
spying on his two flatmates now.
Yeah.
It reminded me of a movie. I don't know, Jeff, if you have any memory of this. There's a movie called Bad Ronald from the early 70s.
I don't know that movie.
And it was actually, I'm going to bring it up again. It was a 4:30 movie.
Okay.
It was a made-for-TV movie in the early 70s, and they reran it on ABC on the 4:30 movie in the late 70s, early 80s. And it was about this kid who's a shut-in who lives with his mother, and he accidentally kills one of his friends when he's maybe 8 or 9 years old. And he runs home and he tells his mother, and he says, "Oh no!" She says, "Oh, I'm going to have to hide you. They're going to come after you." So she makes the kid live in the walls of their house.
Harry Potter. Was this kid Gary Coleman?
What
you talking
I
about?
forget who played the kid. He
Matt
wasn't
Arnold.
Gary Coleman, no. But
That would have been great. Gary Coleman killed.
yeah, and I could see him asking the mother, "What you talking about, Mama?" Like,
What you talking about?
So she sets him up in the walls of the house, even sets up a fake bathroom. I don't know if she was like a master plumber or
I was
what.
going to say that's a pretty elaborate.
She sets up a toilet in like behind one of the main walls or walls off a bathroom. 10 years go by. The mother eventually dies, leaves the kid there. So he's in the house. Another family moves in.
What?
Doesn't know that the kid is living in the walls. Family.
I've never heard of this movie whatsoever.
So it reminded me of this when David's drilling holes. And it's funny
Yeah, and he's
because
spying
Ewan
on
McGregor is sitting on the couch watching a game show. And suddenly, like, there's dust falling into his
Right.
eyes. Now, I did read, like, offset in order to achieve the shot. There's just some crew member standing above him, and he's sprinkling dust over his head. And if you look closely, you can see the shadow of the crew member that's standing right off the camera.
Like I said, BBC sensibility.
But yeah, so David lives up there, and he's living with the money, and the other two don't know what's going on. They're like, what is going on with him? So,
Right.
and they're paranoid that he wants to take the money for himself, and that's why he's doing this. So the two thugs eventually pinpoint that this is the flat where Hugo ended up. They go in there. They take a crowbar to Ewan McGregor's legs, to Alex's legs. They put a plastic bag over Juliet's head, and they hog tie her up. And Ewan McGregor gives up the goods immediately. It's in the loft. It's in the loft. So they go up. They take the ladder. They go up to the loft. They don't know that David's up there. He hears them coming, and he's seen this whole thing go down because he's got holes in the ceiling, right?
Which are now like the size of fists.
So he's waiting up there with a hammer. So he kills the first one that goes up there. The second one goes up, and he dispatches him easily as well. And
Goes
dumps
all
them
like
both
Die
down
Hard
the
on
hole.
him. Yeah.
Yeah. So like Rambo, he emerges from the attic. You know, he unties Alex
he saved them.
and
He
Juliet.
saved them all.
He saved them all. And then he takes it upon himself, because I think he likes it at this point, to bury these two out in the same shallow grave. And you see him sawing away at the feet and the legs and the hands.
I got this. I'm good now.
Yep, I know exactly what to do.
Yep.
So he hides them too. So at this point, the police are looking for Hugo as well. And there's these scenes that are, these paranoia scenes where the police come and they're interviewing Alex and Juliet, and that they know something, but they're just giving them enough information to oh, interesting. You don't have a fourth flatmate. Write that down.
Yeah. This takes a serious turn into crazy town.
It does.
It just shows you what money just turns people into crazy.
So this is where, when the police start coming around and asking them bizarre questions, they start to turn on each other. So this is where you see Juliet go buy plane tickets to
Travel
Rio
agent,
because she's planning on taking the money and vamoosing. David is still there in the attic with the money, I believe, at this point. No, because
he left.
Juliet seduces him at one point.
That's right. Yes.
So just to try to get the money out of his hands. Juliet and David are coercing against Alex. Alex comes home one day and finds them together. He sees David out of the attic, and now he thinks that they're conspiring against him, which they kind of are. So,
right. Do you think Eccleston had an ass double? You get out of bed, you saw his buttocks.
You saw his buttocks, yes.
Yes, you did.
No, I'd like to think that was him.
That probably was him. I don't know. But yeah, but you go back and said that Alex was like a writer. I think he was like an investigator or something, because at one point he gets called in. They find the car, and he gets called in to cover the story of the mutilated body that they uncovered. So that's like you're right back at the scene of your own crime. And covering it.
Do you think that he wrote the front page article on his newspaper?
Probably, right.
So the movie ends up in this climactic battle between the three of them. where
Yeah,
there's
it's crazy. Like they just all turn on each other. It's nuts.
Alex gets stabbed through the shoulder, pinned to the floor. And so how did David die? I'm trying to remember now how David died.
Didn't she? I don't have it in my notes how he died, but he did die.
I think she came up behind him and stuck the knife through his neck.
Oh, through his neck.
He saw that.
Through the neck.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So he's the first one to go.
So Juliet is the one that kills him and then stabs Alex. No, because David stabbed Alex, didn't he? And then
yes, and then she comes and you think that she's going to help him, and she drives it further into his shoulder,
and then pins him to the floor with
completely pins him to the floor. Yeah, like she's brutal. All of a sudden, you're like, "What the is going on here?" Like they just have lost their minds.
And then she takes the money to go to Rio. Yep. She takes the suitcase and leaves him there. But he gets the last laugh because
he's sitting there while the police come in, and
in a scene earlier, not too much earlier,
newspaper. He was cutting up the newspaper headlines.
He brings a whole bunch of newspapers home that he had a part in writing the story, and he's snipping that front page off of each of the newspapers. And you
didn't really know what he was doing.
What he was actually doing was replacing the money with all these newspaper clippings and putting that in the suitcase. And he put the actual money under the floorboards. And
you get that brilliant, it reminds like Tarantino does that kind of stuff too, where you just pan down, you see his body, you see the floorboard with the knife through it, and underneath the floorboard, you see all the money. And he's just laying there laughing maniacally. And then you're just you're a big old genius.
But you hear the police come in at the end, so you don't know what happens to him.
Yeah, no,
And he just says, "Oh, hello!" Like when they come through the door, and then you cut to Juliet at the airport, realizing that she has no money, but she has no choice but to go to Rio anyway with no money because she's on the lam.
Yeah, she opens up the suitcase and boom.
So you don't really know. Does Alex go to jail? It
doesn't matter. I don't know.
That's the end because that's the end of the movie.
Well, I would pin everything on her.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
I
David's
didn't stab
already
myself.
dead.
Right. I didn't stab myself.
Yeah.
She stabbed
and David's
me. She
dead
killed
over
him.
there. I didn't stab him either. So.
Yeah. She's crazy. All I wanted was a rent. Although that flat was pretty amazing. It may be worth killing for.
It was. Now, also, they have the most tone-deaf neighbors ever.
Not a single person ever complained.
They dropped that flashlight down the middle of the staircase. Bam! Now, David is awoken out of a sound sleep because he hears some commotion downstairs, but nobody heard that flashlight.
But he was already paranoid.
And nobody heard them struggling down the stairs with a full body.
Right. No, you get the feet. You get the feet.
And then they had to do it twice more with the other two.
That's right, because nuts. It was good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and it was one of those movies back in the 90s where you could smugly be self-satisfied watching this, knowing that you were on the cusp of like some kind of indie filmmaker here. And
that's
this was the first time that I saw Ewan McGregor as well, was in Shallow Grave, because I remember seeing this, I think, shortly after it was released on home video.
Interesting.
And he was the one that sticks out. Like
I
didn't know who he was, obviously, but I remembered him from when Train Spotting came out. Like, oh, this is the guy from Shallow Grave.
Yeah, and he really doesn't. I mean, he looks like he's about 12 years old in this movie.
Yeah. And this is probably the closest to his own personality that I think, because if you've ever watched that show where he goes cross country, it's him and his friend.
On
the
Long
bikes. Way Back, I think it's called, and they go around the world on motorcycles.
Yep, on the bikes. Yeah.
He is his personality in reality, I think, is very much like this guy Alex, where is very happy-go-lucky kind of a guy.
I think he'd be a nice guy to hang out and have a pint with in a pub. Yeah.
So yes, some fun facts about this movie. It was the most commercially successful British film of 1995.
Interesting.
They actually had to rent £1 million to put in the suitcase. So that's real money that's in that suitcase.
Oh, jeez.
It cost them £1,000 to rent £1 million.
Couldn't you have just rented $250 on top and then the rest just be cut up?
Yeah,
paper?
You think that you don't know.
They didn't spill it out on the bed or anything.
Christopher Eccleston, when he's playing his own corpse at the beginning and at the end, and you see them sliding him into a drawer in a morgue, he was so scared of going in that drawer because I guess he has an issue with closed spaces. He made a crew member be inside there with him because I guess it was kind of open once he went in the drawer.
Oh, gotcha.
He needed somebody to talk him through it.
There's a guy on the top going, "I got you, Chris."
It's like Dr. Sleep inside there with him.
But meanwhile, maybe that's why he became Doctor Who, because it's much bigger on the inside.
Maybe, yes,
TARDIS.
Yeah. It's not cramped when you go into that
He's like,
thing.
I like this.
And Danny Boyle also made a decision not to show any guns in this movie because he didn't want to Americanize this movie.
Huh, interesting.
So the thugs never have guns. They've got hammers. They've got,
They do. They got other tools.
They got other tools, but no
As
guns.
a matter of fact, the DVD that I borrowed from the library, it's just, the cover is just all tools that they use to dismember the bodies.
Yeah, that's
with.
the Criterion cover, right?
Yeah,
Did you get the Criterion version?
I guess it was, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So how many buckets would you offer?
I'm going to go, I'll give it at least 3.5.
3, yeah.
Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah, so did I. I would give it probably 3. It'd be a solid 3 for me.
No, it was new for me.
Yeah.
It was something I had not been aware of, and it was fun to see Ewan McGregor kind of at that young, punky age. He got that foppish Brad Pitt hair from the 90s.
Yeah, and again, even though his character is pretty much as reprehensible as the other two, you can't help
but like
him.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
maybe, I'll go up a 3.25. I'll give it.
You talked yourself into it?
I talked myself into
There
it.
you go. I like it.
So, okay, let's
cool.
leave the world of Ewan McGregor and get back into the Stephen King world. And in our confessional this week,
Confessionals.
we're asking ourselves, because there's plenty of Stephen King adaptations out there. Starting with Carrie, I believe, was the first one, leading all the way up, and that's 1976, leading all the way up to Dr. Sleep. So pretty much almost everything that King has written
has
somehow been adapted in some way.
Yeah.
So we're asking ourselves this week, what is our favorite Stephen King adaptation?
My guess is you're going to have a very long-winded answer, because this is much more, you were much more a Stephen King fan. I know I've only read a handful of the books, so I can't really compare the novels to the movies. But the 3 that I did read were Christine, which I really liked. I didn't like the movie adaptation that much.
No.
I really enjoyed the book. Pet Sematary, which I've gone on record before, scared the living crap out of me. It's a book I actually had to put down.
Ooh. That's a tough
Probably
one.
more
That is
than
a tough
once.
book.
That was some, and again, that's, you're dealing with little kids being killed and brought back, and then you know what, the movie was okay. It was serviceable, but I don't think it really tapped into the horror level. But I'm going to go with Misery.
Oh,
because that book, I think that was about as true. And again, I've only read a handful of the books, but James Caan and Kathy Bates, I mean, that's some straight up scary crap. And it's just that she's nuts. And to me, that's sometimes scarier than, some guy chasing you in the woods with an axe.
yeah, and he is completely helpless.
Yes. Yeah. And that hobbling scene, ooh,
He is at her whim. And
Dirty
again,
Birds.
Rob Reiner revisiting the world
Rob
of Stephen
Reiner
King
directed
after
this,
Stand By Me.
Yep. Yeah, because I could have easily gone Stand By Me, but we've already talked about that.
Yeah.
Now, are you familiar? Are you watching this Castle Rock?
I
That's on
actually just
Hulu.
started. I'm
That's the
about
one on
maybe 2
Hulu.
episodes into it.
Right. I
Not
heard that's
bad.
actually really. Oh, I heard that's good because they're kind of pulling a lot of like different characters and elements from his different books.
Yeah, they are.
into
There's a
this.
lot of references to his to things and places and characters from his other
Okay,
books.
so a lot of like silly Stephen King Easter eggs.
Yeah, like throwaway, like Salem's Lot features heavily in Castle Rock. So there's references like that.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But I'm going to go with the 1994 miniseries, the ABC miniseries of The Stand,
Ooh.
which for a long time, a lot of people thought it was unfilmable before the whole genre of the miniseries was a viable option, I think, for Stephen King works because it was successful in its own way, but it was limited to what it could be because it was on TV. So you can't really do anything that the censors are going to be upset with. But somehow they managed to really stay true to the novelization of The Stand, a physically huge novel. So I think it's a 4-part miniseries, and it was cast perfectly. The story was really true to the book, and I enjoyed it so much when it first came on, and I've watched it over and over since. And I know that they're, I think, in the works of doing a reboot of The Stand.
There have been talks, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm very cagey about that, just because they did such a nice job with this miniseries. Gary Sinise was Stuart Ullman, who was the main character of The Stand. He's cast well. Rob Lowe was cast as a character named Nick Andros, a deaf-mute character who's probably the fan favorite of the novel. And this is pretty much started the renaissance of Rob Lowe in pop culture. So a lot of people really, and me included, were like, what are they doing here? But he won me over with this. So yeah, anybody that hasn't seen the Stand miniseries, 1994, and you're a Stephen King fan, I heartily recommend it.
Okay.
So that's my favorite.
Cool.
So again, like you, Christine is probably my all-time favorite Stephen King novel, and I was so disappointed by
that movie was just a letdown.
Because the novel is just, it's the car possesses the character of Arnie.
It's the love affair. Yeah, there's like a love affair.
And it's not even the car. It's the owner of the car.
Right.
And
correct,
I forget what his name was, but it's not the car itself that's evil. It's whoever was the owner of it that's possessing Arnie and making him like him. And the movie just threw that out the window, it was the car that was possessed in itself. Even though it did have a nice reconstructive effect where the Christine is damaged at one point, and then all the dents pop out of it. That was cool. But that's probably the highlight of the movie for me. The only thing I liked about it.
So
maybe
there you go.
Should do. I think we've talked about this once before, but maybe we should do Maximum Overdrive one of these days.
I haven't seen that in such a long time, but I do remember enjoying that.
Emilio Estevez is in that, right?
Yep. And the Green Goblin.
The Green Goblin.
The Green Goblin truck.
Yeah.
So what's on tap for next week? What are we doing
next week, our Thanksgiving special.
Again,
We are revisiting our TMI Monster Festival that we did last year, the double feature that we did last year. What we like to do, or we would like to make it an annual, until we run out of Godzilla movies at least. Maybe we can start over.
I was going to say, there's plenty of them out there.
Because we have fond memories as kids on Thanksgiving and the day after Thanksgiving on Black Friday, watching King Kong and Godzilla movies. That was Thanksgiving for me back when I was a kid. Much more so than the meal. So last year, what we did, we watched King Kong versus Godzilla and Godzilla versus the Smog Monster, two mainstays of the Thanksgiving holiday on TV. Next week, we're going to revisit two more movies that they used to play quite a bit of on those 2 days off from school. The original 1933 version of King Kong, we're going to tackle first. And then after that, we're going to jump 4 decades into the 1970s and visit Godzilla versus Megalon.
Was that 73?
73. It came out in America in 76.
Okay, gotcha.
With an American distributor.
Now, is this King Kong? Are we going to watch the unedited version with him eating people?
Yes, well, that's the version that I have. So that's the version I'm going to watch.
That is the version. I love that it was so terrifying for people that they had to cut those scenes.
Yeah. Back in those days, movies got re-released in the theater, like decade after decade after decade, because they didn't really start showing up on TV, these classic movies, until the 50s and 60s. So you would go back out, a few years after it came out originally in 1933, they'd put it back out again, and you'd go out and see it. Yeah. And when it made those, the circuits again, that's when they took those scenes out. So they were lost to time for a very long time.
Yeah, long time. I think it wasn't until the 50th anniversary that they finally found those and put them back in.
Yeah. Now hopefully someday they'll find that spider cave sequence.
Right. I think Peter Jackson did a pretty good job of trying to give us a little taste of that.
Yeah. And he actually made we'll talk more about this next week, but on one of the bonus features on the Blu-ray that I have, the original King Kong, he tried with stop motion to create what he thought Willis O'Brien would have done with that original spider sequence. Huh. So it's interesting. Huh. Yeah, that is on tap for next week. Yep. So all you monster fans who have been clamoring for us to talk about this.
Has anyone been clamoring?
No, but I'd like to think that maybe somebody out there has.
Boy, I really wish those guys would do another double feature.
We're going to do it. So King Kong and Godzilla versus Megalon next week.
I like it.
Yeah.
Cool.
So until
that was
then,
fun. Dr. Sleep.
Yeah, Dr. Sleep.
Go see it.
Go see it.
I think it's getting pretty good reviews.
It is. It's not doing very well at the box office for some reason, but it is getting good reviews. So go see it. Go give it some of your hard-earned money.
Sequel fatigue. People are just like, I said it last week. Give me something new. This was new.
It was new. All
right, cool. Yeah. Until next week.
Thank
you very much for listening.
Yeah.
All right, Jim. See you.
Charlatans!